Hello, folks. This is Chris Allison, and I'm doing a video today on how to use and maybe why to use GraphQL. So this is for my team, but also for anyone else who's interested. Really, we're going to walk through kind of some of the basics of GraphQL, some of the benefits of it, and then walk through an example, a proof of concept that we've been working on that we'd like to actually put in place in some parts of national defense. So let's get going. So you've got up on your screen a nice little image from blog.algomaster.io on REST versus GraphQL. So I'm going to assume everybody knows what an application program interface, an API, is, because that's what we're talking about today. There's an amazing video I am going to link in the comments below that walks through exactly why APIs exist, why they're so fantastic, and how they can be used. But the 2-second summary is APIs are how modern applications talk with each other. In the past, you would have hardwired connections. This became really, really untenable as you wanted to start connecting, dozens to potentially hundreds of different systems. And in the internet age, we needed something better. Application program interfaces are that better. Now, a REST API is basically set up with a series of routes. And you can kind of see it over on the left-hand side of the screen here. So the idea, if this is the client, and we're talking about workforce analytics, or we will be a little bit later, so let's use that as our analogy that we'll kind of carry through this whole discussion. If you wanted to know about people, you would send a query to a people route. Right? And you could provide a variable, so you could provide an ID or you could provide something, but it would need to be hard-coded into that route in a very specific way. So you could either ask for, I want the list of all of the people, or I want the list of all of the people with this ID, or all of the people under this thing. And then you would get back a response from the API, which would include all of the data provided in that route. Now, what this means is in a REST API, if you had 150 fields or 5,000 fields or 5,000 columns in the data for a person, you would get back 5,000 columns worth of data. And then as the data scientist or the application developer, you'd need to go through and figure out what bits of that data do you actually need. But then if you wanted something that was related to a client, you would then need to go to another route. So for example, your URL/people/capabilities, and then provide something different. So you wouldn't necessarily be able to get the data from capabilities directly from the person route unless it was already built into this massive data structure, and so on. So if you wanted to have friends or followers of this person or colleagues of this person, that could be kind of the third. So sometimes you would need to query multiple routes in order to get the data you need to kind of move through. You also get tons of information, which makes privacy and security a bit of an issue sometimes, unless it's architected very well. And routes can also get extraordinarily complex. So you have potentially dozens or hundreds of different routes, and you would need data scientists and application developers to know and understand and have access to really, really good documentation on what each of those routes does in order to use it effectively. So now we're going to switch over to talking about GraphQL. So GraphQL is a framework I believe is put in place by Facebook. I'll correct it if I'm wrong, to handle the overfetching problem. And I'll show you exactly what this does. So basically, GraphQL, instead of having multiple routes and each route having its own set of specific criteria and set of specific data structures that it'll return, it basically acts as a middle person between yourself and all the data, and it brings it forward in a way that's very easy for people to understand. So we're going to go in and we're actually going to look at, this is the GraphQL API that's been put together. So we're going to query that just because it's running on a cheap CPU on Heroku. But we're going to start playing with this. So first of all, an important thing about GraphQL is it is generated often from code or from specs. So the API it's not something completely separate. It is something that is built on the set of specs you already have in place. So the documentation is generated for you as you're building the API. So this is really, really important because what it means is, so again, if you imagine there's hundreds of routes and normally you'd need to go to a wiki to say which route is going to give me what you want. In GraphQL, you can just go in and say, well, I would like to know what all of the different queries that are available to me are. And from here, you can see all right, well, I've got some queries around capabilities. This is documentation actually in the code that is then brought forward into the API. And it makes it very, very easy for people to figure out what is going on. And you can drill into these. So, for example, people. So, people is a query that you can ask for. You've got a count, which is an integer, and then it's going to return a person. But what is a person, right? A person, you can then click into that, and you can actually have access to the full data object of a person. And it tells you exactly what is part of this person. And all of this is part of what you actually would see inside the API, but also the data that you're going to get back. So we're going to try this. We're going to go back. We're going to look at we want people. So we're going to start off, and you start with a query or a mutation. So query, we want people. And you're going to see, so you've got stuff popping up on the screen. You basically got helpers showing us, oh, well, if you're asking for people right here, it's going to require a count. So it tells you exactly what it is you need. So you can either click on that and say, we're going to want 10 people. And then looking here, I want to, again, what is a person? Let's go and have a look at that again. So, and we can do that through any of these. So we know that people are going to have all of these attributes. And these are the attributes that we have access to. If you've signed in, you're going to have different access, right? Because you can basically control access to each field based off certain roles or certain different access permissions that you'll set up. So we need to respond, we need to ask for something, otherwise we wouldn't be using the API. So let's ask for the given name. Let's ask for the family name. Oh, we'd like an email address. And then let's ask for something interesting. Now, one of the other things you can do with a GraphQL API is you can have nested queries. So basically, the data model that we put together, and I'll show it to you a little bit later, is people is kind of the core of it. But people have got things, capabilities, right? Skills that they have, or roles, things that they're doing as part of an organization. So we can actually start to look at some of those things. So we can go right down here and say, okay, well, let's care about the active roles that people have. Active roles is its own data object that has its own set of other things. So I'd like to know there's probably a rank. Yeah, sure, there's a rank in the active role. There's going to be probably not work. Let's actually have a look at active roles, see what we can ask for. So we can ask for the title. Okay, so we want the title in English, and we want the rank. So this is a simple query. Again, we've been walked through and we've got full access to all the documentation we need. So I could set this up within the organization to say, I want everyone who's part of this team run a query, get the data back, and then start running analytics on it or use it as part of a program, right? An application. So we're going to run the query. And this is what we get. So these are just the first 10 random people. You'll see some of these people don't actually, in fact, none of these people have got active roles. So, and you can see that through the active roles thing here. So that does not actually come into effect. So being less interesting, let's change this into capabilities. For capability, we want the name of the capability, we want the domain, and we want the validated level. And this is basically to mock up just the idea, what if we actually understood what all of our people could do? All of this is fake data, by the way. None of this is real. And it's basically been set up to prove out the concept of how we could use an API like this to actually better run our organization. So here you can see I've now asked for capabilities, and you've got, so Joshua has got, he has desired validated level for budgeting, desired for travel. He's got desired for everything. He's got none of his own capabilities. So, but here's somebody with a bit more experience, right? We've got Christopher Anderson, who is experienced in engineering, in combat engineering, in the domain of engineering, and an expert in emergency medicine. So that's an example of kind of how all of this works. So basically, you've got access to the data that you've asked for. And this is an important piece. We're only getting the data that we've asked for. Now, another thing you can do is we got to capabilities through people. We also can get to people through capabilities. So the way that the data model actually holds together, you can actually kind of go back in here and say, okay, well, I don't want to start from a person anymore. I want to start from an organization. And under an organization, you will see there's a whole bunch of stuff. There are organizational tiers, for example. Within an organizational tier, you'll have a set of teams. Within a team, you'll have a number of occupied or vacant roles. And within a role, the role is accessing a person. So you can actually get access to all of the data that you have across your organization through multiple pathways, depending on what your use case is. So this is actually like pretty amazing stuff. And effectively, each of these queries, so when we kind of hop back here, is not giving you straight direct access to the data. It could, but you can also basically treat each of these as like an application. You can build business logic into it, is a good way to look at it. So one of the things, and I've already built this query in here, is the query of combat counts. So what is combat counts? Capability counts by domain. So basically, this is a pre-built query that is going to go through all of the data and return you the number of people who have got that skill domain or that capability by a specific domain. So I'll show you what this looks like. So we built here. So it's already built, capability counts by domain. I would build it exactly the same way as before. So for each of the counts, I want the name, I want the domain that it's from, which is a skill domain. I want the level, and I want the counts. So I'm going to run this query, and this is what it looks like. So basically, for each of the each of the capability potentials in the combat domain, we've got, so it starts off with armor operations. We've got 155 people who desire that, 116 novices, 112 experienced, 45 expert, and 6 specialists. So again, all this is fake data, but imagine having a single query that at any point in time is pulling live data that shows you how capable or how ready your people are to undertake certain activities. It also could give you the ability to forecast and say, oh, we need more people with these skill levels, and in doing that, we have this gap here or that gap there, and we're going to make business decisions to then start to close those gaps. So again, so this is basically what it looks like, how a GraphQL API functions, and some of the different things you can do with it. Now, one of the things, so this is Playground, which basically just means like it's an open explorer that helps you kind of run through the GraphQL API. One of the important facets of this, and I've already kind of explained what it is, GraphQL APIs have a thing called introspection, which basically means that the API itself is documented and you can go through and you can understand what that does and what all the different options are and what they mean and all of the data validations and all these other things. So with all of this kind of built in, and again, this is basically an API that I put together. It's built in Rust. I'll link to the GitHub URL down below. This is just kind of what it looks like. So this is the person, this is the code in Rust on what a person is. So you can see like there is a user ID that is behind an admin role guard. So you can only see the user ID if you are an admin within the system. Same thing here for the PeopleSoft ID. Only if you are an admin would you have access to that. And so you can control visibility both within the introspection, but also within access to the data. And then the rest of this is basically set up like just there's a server in the back end. There's a whole bunch of data models for all of these different things, capabilities, affiliations, capabilities, right? We already talked about. So this is what a capability looks like within the system. You know, you've got your ID, your name in English, name in French, what domain it's part of, and then kind of who it's linked to. So you're linking through unique identifiers to all these other parts. So this is the backend. It's running on a server. This is running live. It's took a couple of days to set up. This is an access point to that. But then because this is an API, effectively this allows you to have a data layer that connects directly into the database. And then you can access that through other applications. So I'm not good at front end, so please excuse me on this. But this is another application running on a cheap Heroku server that basically, and please forget the public health, we'll change that, that basically it has no database on its own. It's pinging the API. So basically we've set it up, or I've set it up, to go through and specifically request information from the API. And this showcases how you could have a light application or a mobile application. And all you really need is kind of the front end, the ability to click on a couple of hyperlinks to give you information that you need, or a light form that then pushes data into the database, returns something. And so you can have this single data point feeding multiple applications. And this is really, really cool. So some of the things you can do with this. One, so again, organizational capabilities. If I actually click on it, so single button click, and this was not pre-cached. This is running the actual test, or running a query to the API. So you can go through and see again, there's Armor operations again, but you've got basically a full rundown on all of the capabilities. Again, this is fake data for your organization, and you can use that to make better decisions. You can also do things like start to explore down through the organization chart. And this is basically mock fake data. None of this is real. But if we decide we want to go into the Royal Canadian Air Force here, and I actually need to click on it, you've got the different air divisions. You've got the different technical training division. You can go right down to a team. And then within the team, you can see you've got occupied roles. And again, fake data. This is all just kind of random stuff. So it might not make sense. Designed to show what you can actually do. You've got the person, and you've got full access to their information, including the role that they're in, the team that they're in, their past roles, their current capabilities, potential job matches. Because in this API, we have roles separated from people, we can have capabilities required for roles, and then we can match against that. And this is done automatically. So when I clicked that button for this person, it basically went through, submitted a GraphQL query that returned all of this information in like a half second on a server I'm paying like, I don't know, $5 a month for. So the potential of having this data is really, really cool. And within that, we'll go into the potential job match, and we'll see that person's not the only one. So for a combat engineer, comms, corporal, these are all the people whose capabilities meet the requirements of this position, and we're doing auto matching throughout this system. You can do some other cool things from this as well. So if we kind of go back in here, and we go into, chances are, no, that's not going to work because there's a problem there. So here's another view, right, of this data. So basically, you can kind of go in, and you can have org charts built on the fly. So you can explore and see who's where, what organization are they part of. This is part of an older piece. So I had basically run the query and stood it up behind. So this is, it was just something to show kind of a cool org chart design, but it is a pretty cool org chart design. So I have no shame. So basically this is a GraphQL API. This is how it works. These are some of the potential things that we can do with it. And again, you can start exploring any of these things in here. So we'll do another query. This time we're going to care about teams. Let's go teams by name. We'll choose name, and we want teams with, let's just call it, I don't know. Okay, maritime. And then for each of these teams, what do we want? We would like the occupied roles. For each of those occupied roles, we would like the rank of that role. We want the person. And again, this is another way to get to the person. And then we want their given name, their family name, and their email address. Oh, and I forgot a colon there. That's going to make it better. So you run it. So basically here's, and we should probably ask for, we want the name of the team, right? So, and let's also get the organization level. And for that, we would like the name there. So this is going to show us kind of where in the organization these teams are. So Maritime Forces Atlantic in Maritime Forces Atlantic. And here's all of the different people that are part of this team. So you can do some really cool stuff. And again, workforce is just one view of this. But the idea is, and you can also do cool things where You have subgraphs. So this is like a workforce subgraph. You would have like a project subgraph and a finance subgraph, and you would have a single query point that would then go out and get the data you needed from all of these different systems, pulling it together to give you the view that you need to actually run your business. So that's kind of the idea behind GraphQL, some of the cool stuff you can do with it. And here's a bit of a teaser. One of the other things you can do with it is because GraphQL is so like strictly typed, it's so declarative, and because of introspection, this is a fantastic way to actually think about including large language models in your workflow. Because you can basically say, according to this access level, this is what this user can do, and you can give through a model context protocol server access to the GraphQL API to a large language model, right? And from that large language model, you can then start to explore and do a bunch of cool things. Cole's notes are, I've already done this. So this is basically an MCP server that's running just on my local laptop. But in this, we're going to introspect, and I would like to go down to depth 3, and I want to see what queries are available. I'm going to run the tool. I get a success. And now I should be able to head over here. So this is Claude. And Claude is hooked up to the MCP server. So I've already asked him, like, what MCP tools do you have access to? Workforce Analytics GraphQL API. So using the Workforce Analytics API, what are the skill gaps in the Canadian Armed Forces? Okay, so basically what you've got here is Claude, and this is just a personal account, going through, and it is exploring everything that it can use in the API. Now, the good, cool things about this, like the dangerous uses of LLM, are you give it direct access to your database, right? And it can go through and write anything because like this is, they're pretty idiotic. But because the GraphQL API is so strictly defined, one, it can't hurt anything. It's only got read access. And two, even if you did want to set it up so that it could make changes or it can mutate the data, you can control that as well, right? So here's, it's still kind of running through, but it's looking for skill gaps. And it's basically gone through and it's basically pulled out all of the different ranks of, for armor operations, again, novice, the number of counts, for experienced 112, expert 45. So it's running the same query that I ran at the start of this. It's pulling this data in. It's pulling a lot of data in, figuring out all of the personnel. It's figuring out a way to basically identify gaps in the resources. And behind the scenes, LLMs are doing what LLMs do, right? It's looking for patterns and it's writing out the analysis. Now, I could run out of tokens in this. Again, this is all on my own dime, but the opportunity to have large language models connected into GraphQL APIs to actually help us to better understand what's going on is really, really exciting. So, and here it is, strategic intelligence for military intelligence. So the immediate priority, again, all fake data, combat readiness. So 1,500 infantry operations shows the largest absolute gap with 193 personnel, which it has identified as a shortage. Marksmanship, urban combat, strategic concerns. So again, this is fake data. It's a relatively, well, it's a good LLM model. It's Claude, but this is just to showcase kind of some of the stuff that we can do and some of the stuff we can do quite quickly, right? And then of course, create a simple one-page visualization to highlight your findings. And of course, LLMs doing what LLMs do. So we'll see how this works out, and then we'll close this close this video off. But I'd love to hear what you think. I'd love any comments down below. If you have thoughts on kind of places to kind of build out this kind of data ecosystem, ways that if you've done it, I'd love to hear. If you've got plans for building it into your own organization, love to hear. If you'd like to come and work on it, I'd also love to come in here, or I'd love you to let me know. So we will see what this comes up with. I'm going to stop prattling on, and then we will shut this down. Chances are this is heavily, heavily over-engineered and will not work, but let's see. There you go. Nice. Easing red numbers. Okay, that's pretty cool. So the number of folks that need training, combat skills gap, the top critical domains that you've got here, some nice little hovery things to impress people, and the ability to show kind of where some of these things are. So anyway, that is the how and why to GraphQL, some cool stuff you can do, and dipping our toes in how we can use Model Context Protocol plus GraphQL to do some really, really impressive things across data in our organization. So with that, thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, and I'll hopefully hear from you soon.